So right now I'll show you another example of pivot table. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another pivot table. So we're going to click on Insert, and then we're going to click on Pivot Table, and then we're going to highlight the data. So we're going to again clear the data first, and then we're going to click on the arrow up key, and then what we're going to do is we're going to click on the cell A4, and then we're going to click on Control, and then we're going to hold on to Control and Shift, and then we're going to click on arrow to the right, and then we'll highlight all the data to the right, and then we're going to click on arrow down, and then we'll highlight all the data downward. So really quickly, in a couple of seconds, I have highlighted all the data from A4 to H1822 to the very end of the data set. So again, Control, Shift, arrow to the right, and then arrow to downward. And then you press Enter, and then now the cell has been inputted. Then what we do is we press OK. And then that's how we generate the pivot table. Once we have the pivot table created, then what we're going to do is we're going to put the line into the row again. So in the line, we have the fruit, meat, and vegetable in the row. And then this time, we're going to put the quantity into the column. So quantity, again, is a numerical variable. So note that when I put the quantity into the column, you can see that now it will display all the numerical variable in the data set. So in our data set, you can see that we have the quantity sold from 1 quantity all the way to 51 quantity sold. And you can see that there's a lot of columns here. And when we're organizing our data, we don't want to have too many columns. We just want to have a couple of columns. So what we need to do is we need to group our column. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the numbers in the column. Any number will work. And then what we're going to do is we're going to right click. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click on Group. Once we click on Group, Excel will give you a recommendation. We're starting to group from the 1 all the way ending to 51, and then we're grouping by 10. So that's the recommendation that Excel gives. And then we just press OK. You can change the recommendation if you want, but we're good with this recommendation. So we press OK, and you'll see that once I have clicked OK, Excel has grouped the data by 10 for us. So now we're grouping the data from 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 30, 31 to 40, and then 41 to 51. So instead of having like 20, 30 columns, now we have 5 columns. So it's a lot easier to analyze the data. So again, what you do is you right click on the numbers and then you click on Group, and then Excel will give you the recommendation. You can change it. You can group it by 5 if you want. You can group it by 20s if you want. In our example here, we're good with grouping it by 10s. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to put the price. We're going to drag the price into the values. And as soon as I put the price into the value, you can see that we have the sum of price here. And then that sum of price is displayed here. So whatever you see on the top left corner of the pivot table is what we have in as the value. So what we have in the value is what we have in the top left corner of your pivot table. So right now it shows the sum of the price, which is not that useful to us. So what we're going to do is we're going to change it. We don't want the sum of the price. What we want is the average price. So how we change it is we click on the sum of price, and then we're going to click on value field setting. Click on value field setting, and then instead of using the sum of price, what we're going to use is we're going to use average of price. So in another situation, you might want to use count. In some situation, you might want to use max or minimum. So there are different ways to show your data. Right now, we're just using the average in our example. So the pivot table has these other functions as well, but we're just going to use the average price right now. We'll press OK. And then once we press OK, you will see that now it shows the average price. And then we're going to format it. We just highlight the data. And then we're just going to format it to 2 decimal places, so it's a lot easier to understand. So once we have organized the data and format the cells, so what you can see is that fruits has the highest average price at $6.47, and then meat has the lowest average price. And then we can also see is that for any transaction that has 20 to 30 quantities sold, this quantity range seems to be the range where we have the highest average price for each product sold. So that's some of the very basic analysis that you can do with the pivot table. So for this example, what you need to know is that if we want to put the numerical variable into the column or the row, what we need to do is we need to group the data. And how we group the data is we click on the numbers, and then we right click, and then we click group, and then we can choose the format or the grouping that we desired. And then we press OK, and then Excel will group the data for us. Another thing that you need to know is you need to know what to put into the value. And how we know what we put into the value is we look at the top left corner. Whatever we have in the top left corner is what we put into the value. And what you also need to know is that sometimes you don't want to have the sum. Sometimes you want to have average, or sometimes you want to have the count. Sometimes you want to have the maximum or minimum. And how you change it is you click on the average of price, and then you click on the value field setting, and then you can change it to which format that you want. And that's what you need to know from this example.